Hey folks, how are you today? I'm glad that you're here. We're making this video today because a lot of people don't understand how the Medicare system works. And the reason is because there's quite a few of you who think that reverse mortgages or there's not going to be any liens on the property or any of that other stuff doesn't have an impact on whether or not you can close the estate or not. And it actually does have a high impact on if you can close the estate. So I want you to picture this particular scenario, and this scenario has been put into my mind by WFAE, which is in Charlotte. You've lost a loved one, and you've inherited the person's home, and you start making grand plans and whatnot. But while you're still in the grieving of the loss, and it might have been your mom, it might have been your grandmother, you've been informed that the state of North Carolina is going to seize the property that you just inherited because your loved one was on Medicaid, or they were on Medicaid, didn't tell anybody, and by the way, the lien was filed and they were never told that there was a lien against the property. Well, the issue is moreover one over top. And the reason is because a lot of people don't understand that Medicaid and Medicare is not one of those things where it is just funded by the federal government. Well, Medicare is. But the thing about it is that what people don't understand is the Medicaid that is used has a recovery program attached to it. And when they sign up for that, they also sign up for the Medicaid recovery program, which allows states to recoup money or property that is spent on long-term services and support, so that nursing home care or having home-based caretaking services, prescriptions, or things related specifically to the case can be recouped. Because a lot of the state stuff is state-sponsored. It's not federal-sponsored. There's a 50-50 split in there. It might be a 60-40. It might be whatever. But the state, this is why Medicaid expansion was such a bad idea, is because now you have the government or the state Medicaid office now able to take your property and take your inheritance and claw it back from you to satisfy a debt from Medicaid. It's also very expensive for the government to come after this. It's also expensive for the government to shoulder it. So when we take a look at it, if your family member has a $250,000 Medicaid bill and your house is worth $5.5 million, they're going to take the entirety of the real estate, unless you can drop the $250,000. Now, sometimes you can work it out where you can sell the property and then satisfy the lien and then transfer the deed. But or you can at least get a loan against it and then turn around and then do it that way. But there's a couple of ways that you can handle it. So in 1993, during Bill Clinton, they made it mandatory that states attempt to recoup money spent on those services from estates of the deceased Medicaid recipients. And basically what it is that once they died, the Medicaid or the federal government or the state government that's in charge of that can come after it, in the hopes that it would help states replenish those funds and keep the program going. But the problem is that it not only is it expensive to run the program, it's also expensive to put liens on it, foreclose on it, turn around, try to sell it. So on top of the loss that they have trying to keep your loved one in somewhat decent health, now they have the cost of actually trying to sell the property and recoup those funds. So when you're attempting to qualify for Medicaid, your home is not counted as an asset. And the reason why it's not counted as an asset is unknown. It really is. One second, I had an irritating thing. But when it comes to estate recovery, that home is absolutely counted as an asset. So let me say it again. If you are qualifying for Medicaid, then your home is not an asset. But once it goes into the estate, it becomes an asset to which the state can recover it. And that home is absolutely counted as an asset, and the state can seize it to pay off the Medicaid debt. 9 times out of 10, you will see a Medicaid lien filed against the deed inside of the register of deeds on that particular property. So that's where part of the confusion is surprise, your asset that wasn't used in qualification is now used as what you can reclaim to recoup and turn around and sell to, you know, put your funds back. The thing about it is to understand is to qualify without it is one thing. But if you run up a debt and then it becomes part of the estate, then it becomes an asset. Now, you might have a last will and testament. You might have all of this other stuff that you have. That's all fine and dandy. But if there is something in your name in which Medicaid can latch onto, they're going to latch onto it. And that's where a lot of people get confused is there's the, well, you never used the asset for me qualifying for Medicaid. Why are you taking my asset now that I've qualified for Medicaid and you're going to be giving me this government program? Well, the government program is subsidized from the federal government, from state funds, but in order to pay it back, you have to sell your assets. And that's where a lot of people get confused. So part of the confusion is the surprise that some people are faced with after a death of a loved one is how come I can't have the property that's willed to me? And that's because there's a lien against it from the state for Medicare. Attorneys and advocates that most often they're saying that people don't understand that, and they can request a hardship waiver to say basically, look, the estate has no money. The estate is basically out of money. And there's a time frame to request the appeal of that. And in North Carolina, it's within 60 days of receiving the estate recovery notice. Any unanswered recovery notice, there's a legal thing in there where if it goes unanswered, then the state can come in and take it. So you have to respond to that. We've had estates that are open 10 years that had that lien. The house has fallen in. Looters and squatters have gone in and destroyed the entire house. So the $300,000 house that could have been used to pay off the $50,000 Medicaid lien is now worth $61,000 or so. So you wind up owing. In one case, we had one that was $93,000. And then the property sold for I think it was 63,000, and it was not worth 63,000 because the house collapsed and everything else because it was abandoned for 10 years. If it was kept up and there was actually rented out or something like that, that income could have went paid off the Medicaid lien, but they didn't, unfortunately. So any of the recovery programs, when you're attempting to qualify, it's one thing. When you're attempting to sell, it's another thing. The important thing to understand is that the program is meant to serve as for the poorest in our society. So when they're faced with this, it's going to be harder for them to afford an attorney who can take care of it. Attorneys can range anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500 to $7,500 to $10,000 to take care of it, or in some cases they do $250 to $350 to $450 an hour. And sadly, many legal aid organizations are already cash strapped, and the few really have dedicated people who are knowledgeable about the specific area of law. And sometimes you're real estate brokers who have no clue that there's a deed out there or a lien out there, commonly get in trouble. because they have to give back their commission because they didn't do their homework. And let's not forget the state's required to notify a deceased estate within 30 days of their death that there is a lien. That means they're coming to people who have recently experienced a family death, are in the thick of the grieving process, or in the middle of the probate process, and they're getting a letter saying that it's more than likely that there's a lien against the property, and they're going to have to either cease it, or they're going to have to sell it, or and give them back any funds that are due to them. The letter is more likely going to be a shock than it's going to be a pleasurable thing, but it's one of those things that happen. And it's perfectly legal. A lot of people say, well, this is illegal. You can't take our property. And yes, they can. Figuring out what to do after the summons uh, is going to take it's going to summon all of the energy that you have left within that 60-day time frame you have to request that undue hardship. And if you don't, then you're going to have a larger issue. And lastly, uh, returning back to the fact of how Medicaid works and how the estate recovery programs are run, they're different in every single state. So, where, for example, in North Carolina, the government only has access to what's in the probate estate. Uh, in Oregon, for example, they go after far more assets. So, depending on where you live, you may lose more or less. And what we mean by that is that in Oregon, they actually go down to the cars, trucks, vans, buses, even if there's a mortgage lien or a loan against the property. Um, they go against any kind of personal property, such as all the way down to a battery or the last piece of dust on the floor. So it's really important to understand that Medicaid is one of those things where it's hard to work around. Now, that being said, there is a couple of things that's coming through Congress, and one is called the Chip Payment and Access Commission Act. And that what they did was they did an analysis of Medicaid data in 2021 and showed that Medicaid estate recovery recouped less than 1% of the annual fee for service spending on long-term care between 2015 and 2019. And that's just a drop in the bucket. But for those families, it's everything. And on top of that, not only that, but it costs more to go chasing after those assets than they're recouping. So you would think that it doesn't matter. Well, it matters to the government, and that's the problem. Is the government goes after the single dollar, and they're willing to spend $400,000 to get that $1, versus just going, that money's gone. And while it was a great idea to have Medicaid expansion, uh, more and more of these Medicaid liens are going to pop up. So what are you really going to do? The good news is that North Carolina recently changed the recovery policy, and so instead of waiving a debt, undue hardship actually functions really as a referral. Their attorney is currently working to get answers in some cases, and in other cases, if the property is no longer worth what it was supposed to have been worth, then they're going to have to take a cut in that. But in every single case, when you have to get attorneys involved and you have to deal with the state, and then when you get done with the probating of the estate and all the other costs associated with it, the only people who really come out on top is going to be the state or the attorneys, and the estates are not going to come out well at all. But that is one of the risks that we take when we deal with Medicare, and unfortunately, it's a risk that it's going to continue on until somebody says, enough is enough. We're spending more money than we're getting in return. It's time for this to be sunset, and we cut the benefit amount to something that's a little bit better. Some of these places have $93,000 in Medicare benefits that are handed out, and some of these have $250,000 Medicare benefits handed out. But by the time you get done with it, either The estate has no money, or the estate has no money. The estate has no money because they've sold off the assets in order to have the person uh, on Medicaid, or they're paying their own bills, or they're they have no money because Medicaid came and took the last asset or the last four assets that they had in order to pay it off. It's really up to the family, and it's really up to everybody else. But if you needed, uh, if you need a individual who can help you go through that, that would be an estate planning attorney. And if you need to, uh, let me know what you think. DM me and let me know, and I will get you in touch with the estate planning attorney here around here where we're at. Anyway, this is Matt Price. I am your auctioneer and your real estate broker, and I am trying to keep money in your pocket every single day. Have a great week.